Hello everyone, my name is Amber Bell from Training Dynamo. I recently put together a blog post to explain some of the changes that have happened with the IRS 1099 forms. I decided to take a few minutes and make a quick video so that you guys can see those changes and where the updates have happened inside of GP. So we're going to go through those changes, explain them, and then tell you how it will work in GP. I also want to give you a couple options. If you are not able to do the update or upgrade at this time, I want to make sure that you have a way to survive this change and be able to get your forms out on time. The first thing I recommend is going onto the IRS website and taking a look at the About 1099 NEC form page. That will give you instructions on this form and also changes to the 1099 miscellaneous form. I have links to that inside the blog, and I'll link to the blog with this post, so you'll be able to get to both sets of information for taking care of these. So it's going to be on irs.gov, and you could search for that form in the search, but I'll give you a direct link to this page. The 1099 NEC form is used for non-employee compensation. It replaces what used to be done on a regular 1099 miscellaneous form in box 7. Because it's a completely brand new form, and because no longer is that box 7 going to work on the miscellaneous form, that means there are changes to both the 1099 NEC, which is a new form, and also the 1099 miscellaneous form. A little bit of trivia: the NEC form was used until I looked at a million blogs about this, but I think it was 1982 or 83, but a million years ago. But it has come back, and we want to make sure that you're aware of how to use them and also how to get the information if you're not able to do the upgrade. So we're going to go through that. Now, as I mentioned, the 1099 miscellaneous form has changed. I'll show you what that looks like as well, and make sure that you don't try to mix them together because they are definitely different forms this year. Okay, so this is the 1099 miscellaneous form. You still will probably need to generate some of these forms if you do anything like payments to rents or payments to attorneys, or my favorite, if you have fishing boat proceeds, if you happen to have that, it is still on the 1099 miscellaneous form. So it hasn't gone away, it is still going to be used. They do have different due dates, so make sure you take a look at that. I put that in the blog post as well. The date that they're due to the person receiving is the same for both, but the date that they're due to the IRS is different. But always check the IRS website for the latest information, and make sure you check that instead of relying on what I'm saying today, just in case those information changes next year if you're trying to do this next year. So in order to deal with this change, Microsoft did release a change to GP that addresses it. If you are running GP 2016, it's called an update. So you will be just getting these changes that are part of the 1099 change. You would have to run that update. It would have to be something I'd highly recommend that you test. The reason I recommend, especially anytime you're doing an update or an upgrade, you want to test. The reason is that this, especially compared to other little changes that might be released, does change the tables for the vendors. It changes the tables for the 1099 information, how it's being stored. It adds fields to the 1090 or the vendor window. There's now going to be a DBA field, so it's quite a few changes that came as part of this, especially if you have any customizations to that window done in-house or done by your partner or a programming company, or if you have any third-party products that integrate with GP to process payables. Some of those need to write to those fields for 1099 amounts. They need to map to 1099 boxes. And right now, depending on what integration tool you are working with, those might not work yet. So Microsoft hasn't released a change for that. There's an option in the blog post on voting for making that change, but just be careful. It might be better to hold off on doing this update or upgrade if you have integrations. So definitely check with your partner, check with the companies that did those integrations to see if they're ready for this change. I also had another client completely unrelated to the AP windows, but just randomly I had a client, I heard of someone else who had a client, that one of the things that was a little weird was inventory transaction, edit lists, and posting. These things have been fixed. We went through a couple fixes with Microsoft on a support call. We got them working and they're fine now. But that just makes me want you to remember that whenever there's an update, it doesn't just mean check the couple things that you know changed. Post things in windows that are critical to your business and make sure reports print, everything works. That's why it's often good to do this in a completely separate test environment without it, not even on the same instance of GP, so that you can fully test before you deploy this to your production environment. Test, test, test. That's the big lesson for the day. Next, we're going to show you some of the changes to the vendor window. So I'm going to pull up GP and I'll show you those changes. Okay, so right now we are looking at the vendor maintenance window. The way that I got to this window was I clicked purchasing in the sidebar on the left side. I clicked purchasing down here. Under cards, I went to vendor, and then I pulled up a vendor. So this vendor here is a vendor that's going to get a 1099. So we're going to go ahead and go to options and check the settings. So in this window, there's now a tax type that's called non-employee compensation. One thing that I noticed is that I had a class ID called USA USC, and this for contract services. That was one that I used to have for everybody that was 1099 in my test company, or the one that came from GP. When that comes in and it uses that default class, it goes like this. It just uses the next one in line in that box, so it's not the correct one for non-employee compensation. So if you're using the class to drive this, you'll want to update your class, which I'll show you here. You'll want to update your class to say non-employee compensation, so any new employees will get that, or non-employees, new vendors will get that correct tax type. So just be aware of that, if it's defaulting to miscellaneous, it won't use the correct box. It's not going to NEC anymore. So we want to switch that if that's what you need. There are people that use the class ID and the tax type miscellaneous to do other things. That's why they don't just flip it for you, because they don't know what you were specifically using it for. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is back under options. We've got our two boxes and options here. There are changes in what is listed in our 1099 miscellaneous. You'll see it jumps right over 7. I'm going to go back to non-employee compensation. The other change in this window is the addition of the DBA field. So in here, I just put something in that field. Typically, it would be something like my vendor name, and check name might be Amber Bell, but the DBA is Training Dynamo, or vice versa, depending on how I was set up. So I had a client who, when I showed them this change, they were really excited because they used to do a lot of crazy stuff to make this work in their system. When you print 1099s, both fields will print. Both the 1099 DBA and the check name will both print on the 1099. One of the other windows that has changed is the 1099 details window. I got to that window by going to purchasing, cards, and 1099 details. In this window, I can pull up my vendor again. And one of the changes that they've done is, again, they've changed the options in the tax type, and they've given you a checkbox for the payer made direct sales of $5,000 or more. And that is something that kicks in on that 1099 form. So I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. So if we look at a 1099 miscellaneous, you'll see that the payer made direct sales totaling $5,000 or more, and that's the new box 7. There's also the option for marking that box on the 1099 NEC. That is in box 2 for the 1099 NEC form. If you are able to update Microsoft Dynamics GP to the latest version, you will have everything that I just showed you, which was the change to have the DBA, the new options for NEC. All of those will be included. If you look at my system, I'm using Microsoft Dynamics GP, and I'm going to go into my help, about Microsoft Dynamics GP. And you're going to see here my version, and my version here is 18.3, and then the last part is just if there was any other updates. So if they do a service packet, well, that number would change. The most important is those first three numbers. So if you're running anything lower than 18.3, you won't have the changes that I just showed you. Unless you're running 16, you would see it when GP, it would say up here 2016, you would have that version and you would have those couple changes I mentioned, but you won't have any of the other new changes that came out in GP this year. So I'll show you guys where you can get to that list. And I'm planning on doing videos on what's new in GP to help you guys get familiar with what has changed. But just check that number. If you're doing anything that's 2018 or newer, you will get pushed and automatically updated all the way to this version. They're going to do that full quote-unquote upgrade, but it's more of an update to get you to this. That's again why you want to test if you're going to be moving your GP up. As I mentioned, I'm planning a blog series and some videos on what's new in Microsoft Dynamics GP, but I wanted you to see the website here. It's on docs.microsoft.com, and there's a lot of extra stuff at the end, but if we get into Dynamics 365 and then Dynamics GP, you'll be able to navigate to what's new. And if you look on the side here, they're going to show you what's new all the way back to 2015. Highly recommend checking those out if you're going to be doing the big upgrade. So if you're on an older version, check out each of those, and I'll be showing you some of my favorite new features in other videos. I had this window up a couple minutes or a couple seconds ago, and the reason I have this up is in my blog I mentioned a couple options if you are not able to do an upgrade. If you're not able to do an upgrade right now, like I mentioned, if you are doing an integration, if an upgrade at the end of 2020 with limited people working at the office and all these crazy things going on, it's just not going to work for you, I want to give you some options of ways to properly generate your 1099s. Now the first one I'm mentioning is probably going to be the easiest once the program's installed and connected, and that's going to be using Greenshade's Tax Filing Center. Now they have a video, and I link to that in the blog post as well, showing a demonstration of what this does. I'm going to show you on my blog post just a quick, if you look at this, you'll see this screenshot of their window. And what this allows you to do is it actually can be set up a couple different ways. One way you can upload a template to them, but the easiest way is to connect it, and it can pull that information from GP, and it will work for any version of GP. Now, if you have a super crazy old one, I don't know, I would check with them, but I know it works way back, old versions. So definitely check with your partner if you have questions on that. But basically what this will do is pull information in, and if you happen to be running a version that still does the box 7 for non-employee compensation, it's smart enough to put those on the new form, in the correct fields, in the correct format. They give you the option of they can send them for you, or they can work with you to get them to you so you can mail them out. They work with you if you want to have a portal for people to download. There's lots and lots of options. So definitely give them a call or talk to your partner, and they'll be able to help you if this is the one you want to go with. Now the next one that I mentioned in the blog is creating an export to work with a 1099 processing company. Now with this fix, it does require that you set up a report using SmartList Builder or Designer, and you can pull the information out or run this query in SQL and pull the data out. And the easiest first step is to use this SQL view from Sean Dorward. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. He's a Microsoft MVP and someone I know really well, so I appreciate all the work he did for this SQL view. And what you would do is just come in and we'll select the SQL view, and I'll show you how I create that in SQL in just a second. So I'm just going to select this. Sometimes you can double click the top line, but I wasn't sure. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open SQL and show you how I create this. Okay, so I have my SQL Server database open, I click on the company name or use the company drop down here and select the company or companies that I need to create this report inside of. And then I hit new query up at the top here and paste all that information that I put into my clipboard. When I do that, I can hit execute. Now, because this is creating a view, it is not pushing data. This view is set up to not push new data into the system. It's not updating or changing data. It's simply pulling information from the vendor card and also from the 1099 tables. So we're going to go ahead and hit execute. And that quickly it's done. Now, one thing to note is I am running the GP 18.3.12. This won't be correct for me. Now, I'm going to scroll down. If you see here, get into my 1099 miscellaneous section. Number 7 says non-employee compensation, and we know that that's changed. So I created a different SQL view, and I'll show you that in a minute, that will work if you upgrade to 18.3 or newer, that you'll want to use instead of this view. This view would be great for anyone who can't do the upgrade. So again, you're going to go to Sean Dorward's website, which I link to in the blog post. And his website is lifehacks365.com. And he has GP tips and also Dynamics 365 BC tips, lots of cool stuff. So definitely check it out and bookmark it if you haven't done that already. So we're going to load that, and then we would make that into a Smart List Builder or Designer report. I'm going to show you the final version of the one that I created with my view that's for the new version, what it looks like. But if you're interested in training or help to get that set up, you can contact me or contact your partner and we can get those things set up for you. So I'm going to show you what the final version of my report looks like. It's the same basic report, and I credit Sean all over the place because he did the hard work. I just added the new option in the drop down and the new box changes into this report. Okay, so I created this report using Smart List Builder. I could have done the same report using Smart List Designer, but with Smart List Builder, I get additional options. So for my customers that I've installed this for using Builder, I have this, if they double click on the line item for the vendor, it opens up the 1099 details window, or different windows to do edits if needed. You can open up the the vendor maintenance, whatever they want it to do. But again, what this is going to do is show vendors that were paid by year and the amount paid or calculated by 1099. If I do utilities to update these, then I could rerun it and it would be correct with that information. I mentioned this in the blog post because I've installed this for a couple customers, and I saw a whole lot of extra lines, and they were all for the dividend options. Also, I sometimes was missing some vendors, so I was worried that the view wasn't working. It turns out that what I had to do is to run a utility to just reconcile those tables used for 1099s. That's done under Utilities, Reconcile, Calendar Year, and then you pick the year. And I reconciled everything. I mentioned this in the blog post. You could try to just do 1099s. That would probably be enough. But just to be 100% sure everything was clean for my customers, I did both. Anytime you are in anything under utilities, you want to do a backup first. This is going to be adjusting table information and changes, and in bulk, it could do some kooky stuff. So always do a backup first. Best thing you can do is if you have a copy of your system in a test company, run it over there, see what happens. And then you'll be able to go forward. So this seemed to fix a lot of the weird stuff on those wacky tables. And so there is a table called PM00204. That's the main table for the dollar amounts used in this on the report. And it gets a little wacky, and this fixes it. But again, anytime there's a utility, my rule is do a backup. If people think a backup's running, do one anyway. I had a customer where the backups had been failing and they didn't realize, so I'm very, very picky. Always do a backup. Okay. Now, one thing I want to mention is if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, Why would I go through all that trouble when there's already built-in columns in SmartList that are called year-to-date or YTD and LYR for amount paid or 1099 amount? It has those built in. The reason that I want you to use the SQL view is that I have this up on the screen so you can see it from the blog. It's mentioned in my book. This is a screenshot from my year-end book. If you aren't like every single year you are not, you make a mistake in one year, you close AP late or you close it early and you're posting to 2020 and it meant you're posting it in January of 2021 and you've already closed, that wouldn't be included in that 1099 year to date. Some people never, ever, ever have closed AP. I've worked with clients that no one ever told me to close AP or AR. That would look like the entire amount they've ever been paid would show up in the 1099 year to date. So they'd look like they got paid for the last 5 years in 1 year. So we want to be very careful. The amounts stored in SmartList are not based on the tables and doing the math the correct way that the SQL view does. So don't use that. I've had clients who did and sent it to the IRS and they had to do all kinds of corrections. It was a horrible, huge mistake. Don't do it. Use the SQL view. It's the right way to do it. Now I mentioned before that there's sometimes this wacky stuff in that PM00204 table. You can run that utility. I've also seen other wacky stuff in there and I had to manually clean that up. Work with your partner. They'll help you get this table nice and clean. And then each year you can add to your checklist for the year-end processing to make sure you run that Reconcile before you do your 1099s. So this is where we got to that Reconcile. Okay. Now here is that SQL view that I mentioned. So the SQL view is embedded in the post that I have, I'll link to in this video. You would select it like we did for the one from Sean, post it, and then put that into SmartList Designer or Builder. If you've never done a SmartList Designer or Builder report based on a SQL view, I'm going to show you how to get to that from my website. If you go to trainingdynamo.com and click on GP tip videos, there's a video on SQL views and SmartList Designer, SQL views and SmartList Builder, and the SQL views security for SmartList Builder for those to work, and also giving access to the reports for Designer or Builder. That both are the same for that part, so there's just one video for that. So just trainingdynamo.com and then go to the tips section. The last thing I want to mention is those deadlines. The deadlines for the NEC and the miscellaneous are a little different. 100% recommend checking with IRS, whoever your tax professional is, to make sure you're meeting all the requirements for this. Check with them on who should be receiving the 1099s and the setup you should be doing. But at the end of the day, if you want to pull the data out of GP, I wanted to give you all of your options. So again, option number 1, if you can, work with your partner and get the update and upgrade done before it's time to process those. That's great, but make sure you test. Try posting, try printing documents, make sure nothing is broken. Everything looks great, you're good to go. If you cannot do that upgrade, but you want to have something that does a lot of the automation for you without having to install these extra reports and all of that, you can work with Green Shades. They can pull the data from GP no matter the version and help you process. Can't do those two things, or you don't want to do those two things, you can install the SQL view that I mentioned, and then you'll work with a 1099 processor. I added a couple links to different 1099 processors here in my blog post, you'll see here. And if you are going to do those 1099s, these are a couple different ones that you can use. I am not recommending or endorsing anyone over the other. Some of the ones I've had people tell me they've had great experiences with. Other ones, people said, I've never used it, but I've heard of this one. But they're definitely worth taking a look at. If you've had a good experience or a bad experience, just let me know and I can add or remove from my post. I'd appreciate that feedback. But that's basically it. You want to get that information from your vendors as soon as possible to make sure you have their tax ID. If they have a DBA, that you start getting that information into GP if you've done the update or upgrade, and that you have everything set up correctly. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, or you can reach out to your partner if they're going to be helping you solve this craziness at the end of 2020. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day. And if you make sure you subscribe if you liked it, and see you next time.